You finally understand movies without the subtitles. You can sit down with native speakers and, hold a conversation without your heart completely pounding out of your chest.
Right, you've memorized thousands of words.
Yeah, exactly. You know the grammar rules, and you can get your point across. So, why do you still feel like you're faking it?
It's so frustrating.
It really is. There is this very specific, almost agonizing frustration that hits you right when you think you finally succeeded in learning English. I mean, you reach that magical B2 intermediate level, but then you just hit a massive wall.
A total brick wall.
Right. You hear advanced speakers effortlessly weaving these complex, beautiful ideas together, and you realize your own English still feels a bit robotic. You want to cross that bridge to advanced C1 fluency, but the path just suddenly disappears.
It really is the ultimate language plateau. And if you are listening to this right now and feeling that exact frustration, you need to know that your brain is actually doing, well, exactly what it's supposed to do.
Wait, really? So it's not just a lack of effort?
Not at all. The problem isn't your effort. The problem is that almost everyone fundamentally misunderstands what that wall is made of. We tend to think of language learning as a straight line.
Like you assume that to get to C1, you just need to do exactly what you did to get to B2, but just more of it.
Exactly.
Or,
Memorize another 1,000 flashcards, finally
yeah.
master the past perfect continuous tense. But the transition from a B2 intermediate level to a C1 advanced level is an entirely different biological and cognitive process than going from beginner to intermediate.
That makes total sense. Going from beginner to intermediate is, it's about accumulating tools. Like, you need a hammer, you need a saw, you need some nails just to build a basic chair.
Yes, you're building the toolkit.
Right. But crossing into C1 isn't about buying more tools. You already have a massive toolbox. Reaching C1 is about using the tools you already have with such absolute intuitive mastery that you don't even look at the hammer anymore. You're just focused on the wood. Hey listeners, welcome to English Made Simple, where you learn real English for real-life conversations in a simple and natural way.
And our mission for this deep dive is to break down the exact mechanical differences between where you are at B2 and where you want to be at C1. We are going to explore the cognitive shifts required across speaking, listening, reading, and writing.
And more importantly, we're going to give you actionable daily steps to build that advanced intuition.
Because when you strip away the certificates and the exams, that is what C1 really is.
Yeah.
It's pure intuition.
When you say intuition, it immediately makes me think about getting my driver's license.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Because when you're at B2, it feels exactly like being a newly licensed teenager navigating city roads. I mean, you're a skilled driver, sure.
You know the traffic laws?
Yeah, you stop at the red lights, you check your mirrors, and you can reliably get from point A to point B. And, someone cuts you off, you don't crash. It is functional, it is effective, and honestly, it's a huge achievement.
But you are still actively, consciously thinking about the act of driving.
Yes, you are dedicating a massive portion of your brain's working memory just to the pedals and the steering wheel.
Exactly. And that working memory is the bottleneck. Now, compare that to a C1 speaker. A C1 speaker is like an experienced professional race car driver.
Okay, so they're not just following the rules.
Right. This driver doesn't just know the rules of the road. They have an intuitive, subconscious connection with the vehicle. They can handle any terrain, severe weather conditions, and execute complex, high-speed maneuvers with absolute precision.
Because they aren't thinking about the pedals anymore.
Precisely. Their brain has offloaded the mechanics of driving to their long-term memory, which frees up all their cognitive energy to just react to the environment.
Which completely explains why sitting in your room and reading the driver's manual for a fourth time isn't going to make you a race car driver.
You really won't.
You already know what the steering wheel does.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between the city driver and the race car driver is intuitive control, not theoretical knowledge. So if we look at the actual mechanics of spoken English, how does this cognitive shift actually manifest? Like, what does it sound like when someone stops thinking about the pedals?
Well, the most obvious place we see this is in fluency and something called discourse management.
Let's start with fluency, because I know this is what causes so much anxiety for learners.
Oh, definitely. When you are at a B2 level, you are absolutely capable of taking extended turns in a conversation.
Mm.
You can talk for a few minutes, but there is a noticeable friction.
You use filler words. You pause a lot.
You do. But the crucial thing to understand is why you are pausing. At B2, you are pausing because your brain is rapidly searching its mental dictionary for a basic word or translating a concept from your mother tongue into English.
Right. So you might say, I think that, the environment is a very big problem and we should do something to fix it.
Exactly. You can physically hear the cognitive load there.
Yeah.
The engine is sputtering because the brain is doing two things at once. It's figuring out what to say, and it's translating it.
And at C1?
At C1, the translation algorithm just shuts off. The speech becomes spontaneous and flows effortlessly because the brain retrieves entire phrases as single chunks of data.
So it's not word by word anymore.
Right. Instead of that fragmented sentence, a C1 speaker expressing the same idea might say, the profound environmental implications of our consumer society demand a paradigm shift in how we approach resource management.
Wow. That is a massive difference, not just in the vocabulary, but in the total lack of friction. But wait, I want to push back on this idea of effortless flow for a second.
Oh, go ahead.
Because even in my native language, I hesitate constantly. I say, I pause, I restart sentences. Does becoming C1 mean you turn into this flawless orator who never stops to take a breath?
That is a brilliant point, and it's a huge misconception that really traps learners. C1 speakers absolutely do hesitate. They pause frequently. But the mechanism behind the pause is entirely different.
How so?
A C1 speaker hesitates when they are grappling with a genuinely complex conceptual idea.
Mm-hmm.
They pause to organize a complicated thought, to ensure they are being diplomatic, or to weigh two competing philosophies. They are pausing for the idea, not the vocabulary.
Oh, that is such a relief to hear. You're allowed to think.
Yes, you are.
You just aren't pausing because you forgot the English word for pollution.
Right. And because you are fighting to find basic words, you have the mental bandwidth to focus on discourse management.
And that's how you organize your thoughts, right? Connecting your sentences to guide the listener.
Exactly. When you are at B2, you tend to rely heavily on short, simple sentences and basic linking words. You will say, I like the city, and also it has good shops, but sometimes it's noisy, so I prefer the countryside.
Which is entirely coherent.
It is coherent, but it's very linear. It is essentially stacking bricks one on top of the other.
It builds a functional wall, but it's not exactly a beautifully designed bridge.
Perfect way to put it. A C1 speaker builds the bridge. Because their cognitive load is lower, they could look ahead and structure their arguments using a wide variety of cohesive devices.
Like what?
They might say, on the one hand, urban living offers unparalleled access to cultural amenities. However, a more compelling argument for rural existence lies in the strong community bonds it fosters.
Oh, I noticed what you did there. On the one hand, however, a more compelling argument.
It flows, right?
It really does. When you use structures like that, you immediately command more respect in the room. You are signaling to my brain exactly where your sentence is going before you even get to the end of it. It's highly persuasive.
It is.
But it also makes me realize something. You don't use phrases like a more compelling argument to talk about your weekend plans, so the actual subjects we discuss must have to change, right?
Yes, and this is perhaps the most uncomfortable transition for learners. The training wheels completely come off regarding the topics you are expected to handle.
Because at the B2 level, your comfort zone is concrete, familiar topics, things from your everyday life, your job, your personal experiences.
Exactly. If I ask a B2 learner, tell me about a time you traveled to a new country, their brain easily retrieves that memory and translates it. It's a tangible reality.
But to prove you are C1, you can't just talk about your vacation to Italy.
No, you can't. At C1, you must be able to navigate unfamiliar, highly abstract topics. You have to speculate about things that haven't happened, hypothesize, and navigate complex societal or scientific issues.
Like what kind of topics?
A classic C1 scenario might be discuss the ethical implications of genetic engineering in the context of human enhancement.
I have to be honest, I would struggle to answer that articulately in my native language.
Right.
That requires actively building a philosophical argument in real time. You can't just rely on translating a memory, you are synthesizing new thought.
And that is exactly where the B2 system crashes. You try to tackle an intense topic like genetic engineering using your B2 vocabulary and your B2 brick stacking discourse skills, and you feel completely inadequate.
So what do you need instead?
To handle abstract concepts, you need what linguists call lexical depth.
Lexical depth. I really want to dig into that because I've always felt like my vocabulary as a learner can be incredibly wide, but very shallow.
That's very common.
Like, I know the words sad, angry, and bad, But I don't always instinctively know when to use devastated versus despondent. Is that what we mean by depth?
That is exactly it. It's not just a bigger vocabulary, it's a deeper, more nuanced one. A B2 speaker uses everyday words that get the job done.
Right.
For example, if a company is losing money year after year, a B2 speaker might say, it's a frequent thing. That is clear, but it's generic.
And what would a C1 speaker say?
A C1 speaker uses precise, less common words. They would say, it's a perennial problem. But more importantly, they master something called collocations.
Collocations. Let's make sure we define that for everyone.
Sure, collocations are the unwritten rules about which words naturally belong together in a language. Like, why do we say heavy rain instead of strong rain?
Oh, right. They both mean the same thing logically, but strong rain sounds immediately unnatural to a native ear.
Exactly. C1 speakers have deeply internalized these natural pairings.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just know the word perennial, they know it pairs perfectly with problem.
It's like the difference between a Swiss Army knife and a master chef's customized set of blades.
Oh, I love that.
Your B2 vocabulary is the Swiss Army knife. It is a tool for everything, and it will get the job done in an emergency. But the chef's knife does it elegantly with surgical precision. And I imagine this precision applies to grammar, too.
Absolutely. At B2, your goal with grammar is simply to be correct. You will say, I have never seen such a beautiful painting. And let's be clear, if you can't consistently say that correctly, you are still working on your B2 foundation.
Right, you need the basics down.
But a C1 speaker uses grammar flexibly. They treat grammar as a tool for stylistic flair or emotional emphasis. They might use a technique called inversion and say, never have I seen such a beautiful painting.
Never have I seen. Just by flipping the subject and the verb, it completely changes the emotional weight of the sentence. It commands attention.
It really does.
If you're enjoying this, subscribe to our channel for more English listening practice. But, you know, we've been focusing so intensely on producing this perfect, nuanced language. But to even know that a structure like inversion exists, or to naturally pair perennial with problem, you have to have encountered it first.
Which brings us to the input.
Right, which makes me think the actual bottleneck keeping people at B2 isn't speaking at all. It's a limitation in how they are reading and listening.
You have hit on the most critical, invisible barrier to fluency. The output can only ever be as good as the input. Moving from B2 to C1 means moving from understanding the gist, or the main factual idea, to grasping the implicit, subtle details.
You have to train your brain to understand inferred meaning.
Exactly. The things that are not explicitly stated.
Okay, I need a real-world scenario to picture this. How does inferred meaning play out in a normal day?
Let's take a common listening scenario in a workplace. Imagine your boss walks into the conference room, looks at their watch, lets out a heavy sigh, and says, all right, team, look, the meeting today shouldn't take too long, so let's just get started because we have some issues to cover.
Okay, so how does a B2 listener hear that?
A B2 listener focuses almost entirely on the literal definitions of the vocabulary. They process shouldn't take too long, and their brain translates that as, great, a short meeting.
They process the data, but completely miss the human element.
Right. But a C1 listener isn't just decoding a transcript. They are processing the heavy sigh, the slight delay before speaking, the body language, the micro-expressions.
Ah, I see.
They hear those exact same literal words, but immediately infer the opposite. Oh no, there are serious problems. We're going to be trapped in this room for 3 hours. They grasp the sarcasm, the tension, the music of the language.
That is terrifying for a learner. Because how on earth do you study a sigh? I can't go down to the local bookstore, buy an English grammar textbook, and flip to chapter 4. Implied sarcasm and eye rolls in corporate meetings, it's entirely invisible.
And that is why traditional studying stops working at B2. You cannot memorize implicit meaning from a flashcard. It requires deep, highly observant immersion.
So you have to shift your focus from what is being said to how it is being said.
Exactly. And we see this exact same necessity in reading.
You know, I notice this most when I try to read fiction in a second language. I can read a thriller and I understand the plot perfectly. Like, I know who stole the money and who went to jail. But I feel like I completely miss the emotional undertones between the characters. Is that the B2 gap on the page?
That is exactly the gap. A B2 reader is highly capable of extracting key facts. You can read a news article or a standard corporate email and accurately pull out the who, what, when, and where.
But at C1?
At C1, you are dealing with demanding texts, dense financial reports, academic papers, and literary fiction. And good authors live by the rule: show, don't tell.
Right, they don't explicitly hand you the emotion.
Exactly.
Hmm.
If a character is angry, a B2 level text will simply say, John was very angry. A C1 level text won't tell you John is angry. It will describe John gripping his coffee mug so tightly his knuckles turn white, staring silently out the window while the coffee goes cold.
Oh, wow.
A C1 reader processes that imagery and independently understands the character's psychological state. They analyze the structure, the word choice, and the author's underlying intent.
Okay, this is the pivotal question then. If you can't study this in a textbook and you can't flashcard your way to understanding white knuckles, how do we make that shift? How do you rewire your brain to read between the lines and speak with this architectural structure?
Well, this is where we need to have a gentle but serious reality check. The transition to C1 requires a monumental shift in your daily habits. You have to abandon passive consumption entirely and embrace active practice. Many learners at the B2 level fall into a comfort trap.
What does that look like?
You consume content passively. You watch YouTube videos in English. You listen to podcasts while you're washing the dishes or driving. Because you understand the general topic, your brain releases a little hit of dopamine, and you mistakenly believe you are practicing at a C1 level.
Guilty as charged. I will absolutely listen to an hour-long podcast in my target language while cooking and feel incredibly productive.
We all do it.
But if you pause the audio and ask me to reconstruct the host's argument using their exact grammatical structures, I would stare at you blankly. I understand the gist, but I am just floating on the surface.
And that passive floating will keep you at B2 forever. If you want to break through the plateau, you must become an active investigator of the language. Let's break this down into actionable, realistic steps for each skill.
Perfect. Where do we start?
For listening, you need to stop just listening to easy, comfortable conversational content. Seek out challenging documentaries. Listen to complex, multi-person debates on philosophy, economics, or science.
And I'm guessing I shouldn't be washing the dishes while doing this.
No. Sit down, listen actively, and study the tone. Ask yourself, why did the audience laugh there? What was the implication of that joke?
What about reading? I'm guessing scrolling through standard lifestyle blogs isn't going to build that lexical depth.
No, it won't. You need to read quality, serious publications. Read academic journals in your specific professional field. Read challenging, award-winning literature.
So treating it like a study session.
Exactly. And again, don't just read for the story. Become an investigator. When you see a complex sentence structure, stop. Highlight the advanced collocations. Ask yourself, why did the author choose the word despondent here instead of just saying sad? Write that collocation down.
Okay, I love the investigator mindset for input, but what about output? Like if you don't live in an English-speaking country or you don't work in an international office, how on earth do you practice arguing about the ethics of genetic engineering?
You record yourself.
Oh, no.
I know people hate hearing their own voice, but this is neurologically one of the most powerful tools you have to force your brain out of the B2 plateau.
How does it work?
Give yourself an abstract, difficult prompt. Hit record on your smartphone and force yourself to speak for 3 uninterrupted minutes. Then, and this is the painful but necessary part, you listen back to it.
I can already imagine the horror of listening to myself stumble through an argument on human enhancement.
It is uncomfortable, but that discomfort is the feeling of cognitive growth. When you listen back, you will immediately hear your own B2 habits. You will hear the translation pauses.
You'll hear the brick stacking.
Exactly. You will hear where your discourse management breaks down and you resort to stacking simple embodiment blocks. You will notice where your vocabulary feels basic. Then, you stop, you research the advanced terms and cohesive devices you wish you had used, you write out a better framework, and you record it again. This physically rewires your brain's feedback loop.
That is brutal, but brilliant. It removes the illusion of fluency and forces you to confront your actual output. What about writing? I feel like writing is the easiest place to start because you have time to think, but it's probably the most neglected skill.
It is entirely neglected. And my biggest piece of advice here is simple, stop writing sloppy, rushed texts and comments online.
Oh, totally.
Every single time you type something in English, whether it's an email to a colleague or a comment on a video, it is a free opportunity to practice C1 habits. Pay attention to your punctuation. Capitalize your nouns correctly. Build sophisticated sentence structures even in everyday digital communication.
So no more lazy text speak.
Right. And if you are writing a longer piece, don't just summarize facts. Evaluate the facts, persuade the reader, experiment with rhetorical questions.
I call this the YouTube comment reality check. I see it all the time. People will leave a comment on a language learning video saying, in trying to reach C1 level English, but it's too hard, with no capitalization, the wrong version of two, and zero punctuation.
Yes.
Taking an extra 60 seconds to craft a well-structured, perfectly punctuated, persuasive comment is a brilliant way to practice every single day. If you don't demand precision from yourself in a low-stakes comment, your brain is not going to magically supply precision when you are speaking in a high-stakes boardroom.
Exactly. If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, the journey from B2 to C1 is profoundly transformative. It is about evolving from someone who merely survives in the language getting your basic needs met to someone who can articulate the deepest nuances of their mind with surgical precision.
It's empowering.
It really is. It is about gaining the ability to truly influence, comfort, and persuade others in a second language. It requires patience and highly active engagement, but the cognitive reward is immense.
Okay, let's quickly recap this incredible journey we've been on today in this deep dive. We started with the driving analogy, realizing that B2 is the conscious effort of a city driver, while C1 is the intuitive, long-term memory flow of a race car driver.
Right, and we explored how that intuition looks in practice, moving away from familiar stories to tackle abstract, complex topics. Building lexical depth by trading in generic words for precise collocations, and using strategic grammar like inversion to command attention.
And crucially, we talked about the invisible shift from literal translation to grasping implied meaning. Reading the room, hearing the sigh, understanding the white knuckles in a novel.
And most importantly, we discussed abandoning passive comfort, actively analyzing complex debates, reading challenging texts, recording your own speech to confront your weaknesses, and treating every piece of writing, even a quick comment, as a chance to practice precision. It is about building a magnificent architectural bridge on the solid foundation you've already laid at the B2 level. It takes time and it takes focus, but the clarity you achieve at the top is completely worth it.
It really is. So to everyone listening out there, we want to hear directly from you. Where are you learning English from? What is the biggest challenge stopping you from reaching C1? Which tip from today's episode are you going to try first? And did you find this episode helpful?
Remember, the depth of the language you possess entirely dictates the reality you are able to express to the world.
Which leaves you with one final question to consider today. As you push toward this advanced level, is your ultimate goal actually to sound like an indistinguishable native speaker? Or is it to become a masterful C1 speaker who leverages their own unique cultural background and distinct voice with absolute linguistic mastery? Think about that the next time you hesitate in a conversation. Until next time, keep diving deep.